Hello friends, let us now learn some important points about the disease hypertension. So, first, what is the most common cause of hypertension? Most common cause of hypertension is essential. It is essential hypertension is the most common type of hypertension. Next, if you see hypertension, you can divide the hypertension into two types. One, we have primary hypertension, secondary hypertension. Primary hypertension has no underlying etiology, whereas secondary hypertension, obviously we have the etiology for secondary hypertension. Now, primary hypertension is seen in almost 85% of patients, and primary hypertension is not possible to define. We can't define the primary hypertension, and only 70% of patients will have positive family history will be positive in 70% of patients, whereas secondary hypertension, it is 15% and you will see specific etiology. So if you were asked what is the most common secondary hypertension, the most common secondary hypertension is renal diseases, renal parenchymal disease. Okay, then if you were asked what is the most common secondary hypertension in elderly, most common secondary hypertension in elderly is renovascular disease. It is renovascular disease, nothing but renal artery hypertension. Why is this happening? This is because of atherosclerosis. So these are the most important causes of secondary hypertension. Now let us learn the list of causes of secondary hypertension. Now secondary hypertension, first we have renal causes. Renal causes of secondary hypertension include glomerulonephritis, chronic pyelonephritis, then we have polycystic kidney disease, then renal artery stenosis. Then we have endocrine causes. Endocrine causes include pheochromocytoma, hyperparathyroidism, hyper and hypothyroidism, which is caused by increased thyroid glands production. Then it is caused by acromegaly and Cushing syndrome and even Conn syndrome. Okay, then even some drugs will also cause secondary hypertension. Drugs causing secondary hypertension include bromocriptine, OCPs, steroids, NSAIDs, sympathomimetics, erythropoietin, sibutramine and cyclosporine. Okay, all these will result in secondary hypertension. Now even alcohol will result in secondary hypertension. Next, secondary hypertension, if you see, one more important thing in endocrine process is congenital adrenal hyperplasia will cause secondary hypertension. Then drugs like bromocriptine, oral contraceptives, anabolic steroids, corticosteroids, sympathomimetics, and the other drugs like COX-2 inhibitors, carbenoxolone, sympathomimetics, cyclosporine, sibutramide, bromocriptine and erythropoietin. All these will cause secondary hypertension. Then even preeclampsia is a type of secondary hypertension, and even obstructive sleep apnea will cause secondary hypertension. Okay, so these are the main causes of secondary hypertension. Now let us learn some one-liners. Okay, some lists. Okay, if you were asked what are the common causes of isolated systolic hypertension, Common causes of isolated systolic hypertension. Isolated systolic hypertension is seen in atherosclerosis, aortic regurgitation, patent ductus arteriosus, thyrotoxicosis, and even coarctation of aorta. Atherosclerosis, aortic regurgitation, patent ductus arteriosus, thyrotoxicosis, and coarctation of aorta. You will see isolated systolic hypertension. Then, okay, let us now learn some important points about supravalvular aortic stenosis. Supravalvular aortic stenosis. In supravalvular aortic stenosis, here the aortic stenosis, that is, there is stenosed part above the valve. If this is the valve, the stenosed part is present here. Okay, so this is supravalvular aortic stenosis. This is mainly characterized by there will be external hourglass deformity of aorta. You will see presence of external hourglass deformity of aorta along with the luminal narrowing, which is seen at a level distal to coronary artery. At a level distal to coronary artery, you will see external hourglass deformity of aorta is seen. Okay, so as a result, you will see that there will be discrepancies or differences are seen between the carotid pulsations seen on the carotid artery and the upper extremity pulsations, and also blood pressure and the pulsations will also vary. So in the supravalvular aortic stenosis, you will see presence of crescendo, decrescendo murmur, which is low pitched murmur, you will see, and this is heard at the base of the heart. It is heard at the base of the heart, and this is actually early diastolic murmur. Okay, then let us now learn some important points about coarctation of aorta. Also, if you see coarctation of aorta, coarctation of aorta is of two types. Okay, so if this is the right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle, okay, and this is the aorta, and this is the pulmonary artery, and this is aorta, this is ductus arteriosus. Okay, now if there is dilatation here, then it is preductal coarctation of aorta. If there is dilatation here, then it is postductal coarctation of aorta. Okay, normally if you see, the blood pressure of upper limb is less than that of lower limb, but in coarctation of aorta, blood pressure of upper limb will be more than the lower limb. Okay, now let us now learn the list of diseases where you will see unequal BP in both the arms. So if you see unequal BP in both the arms is seen in Takayasu arteritis. It is seen in Takayasu arteritis, coarctation of aorta, supravalvular aortic stenosis. In this you will see ejection systolic murmur will be seen, and you will also see early diastolic murmur also. Okay, you will see aortic, it is seen in aortic dissection, and it is also seen in obstructive aortoarteritis. there is an effect called as Coanda effect. So what is Coanda effect? It is a tendency of jet stream to adhere to right aortic wall. It is a tendency of jet stream to adhere to the right aortic wall. So as a result, there is higher BP in the right arm. It is seen in ejection system. It is seen in supravalvular aortic stenosis. One more important thing which I forgot is this BP of upper limb more than lower limbs is mainly seen in postductal coarctation of aorta rather than preductal coarctation of aorta. Okay, one more important one-liner is, see, if you see systolic blood pressure of upper limbs more than lower limbs is seen in postductal coarctation of aorta, but systolic blood pressure in lower limbs more than systolic blood pressure of upper limbs by more than 20 millimeters is seen in valvular aortic regurgitation. In valvular aortic regurgitation, you will see the systolic blood pressure of lower limbs more than upper limbs by around 20 millimeters of Hg. But what is normal difference? Normal difference between systolic blood pressure of upper limbs and lower limbs is around less than 20 millimeters of Hg. And even normal difference between systolic blood pressure and diastolic blood pressure of right upper limb and left upper limb is less than 10 millimeters of Hg. Right upper limb and left upper limb, it is less than 10 millimeters of Hg. Upper limb and lower limb is less than 20 millimeters of Hg. So if you were asked to write the list of monogenic form of hypertension, or that is nothing but Mendelian forms of hypertension, that is those which are genetically derived. Okay, Mendelian forms of hypertension or monogenic form of hypertension is of two types. One, we have autosomal dominant form. Second, we have autosomal recessive form. Autosomal dominant form is, if you see, it causes glucocorticoid. It includes glucocorticoid remediable hyperaldosteronism, right? This also includes Liddle's syndrome, pseudo hypoaldosteronism type 2. This is also called as Gordon syndrome. Okay, then we have hypertension exacerbated in pregnancy, which is especially a type of hypertension which is called as apparent mineralocorticoid excess syndrome. Then we have polycystic kidney disease. Then we have pheochromocytoma. So all these are the causes of autosomal dominant monogenic form of hypertension. Then if you see autosomal recessive monogenic form of hypertension include 17 alpha hydroxylase deficiency, 11 beta hydroxylase deficiency. Then we have 11 beta hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase deficiency. So this is the difference. These are the two list of monogenic forms of hypertension. Now let us learn some important points about the Liddle's syndrome. Okay, what Liddle's syndrome are also called as hypertension with metabolic alkalosis. Liddle's syndrome or hypertension with metabolic alkalosis. This is caused by gain of function mutation of epithelial sodium channels. Okay, these are present in the tubules Okay, so these epithelial sodium channels will cause excretion. This is the lumen. It causes excretion of potassium and absorption of sodium. Now because of this there is increased sodium and water reabsorption, thus resulting in increased plasma volume and increased sodium, thus causing hypertension. And this also causes potassium excretion. So there is urinary loss of potassium and H plus occurs. So this results in hypokalemic alkalosis. So what is the treatment or drug of choice is amiloride. This amiloride will mainly block epithelial sodium channels. So this is about Liddle syndrome. Then the next important hypertension which we have to elaborate is hypertension with metabolic acidosis, which is also caused as pseudohypoaldosteronism. So if you see this, so first we have renal. Here this occurs due to the renal tubular unresponsiveness to aldosterone. So here aldosterone is not functioning properly, or there is resistance is seen to the action of aldosterone. To action of aldosterone there may be resistance, may be seen. It is again of two types. One we have pseudohypoaldosteronism type 1, which is also called as classic form. Second we have pseudohypoaldosteronism type 2 or Gordon syndrome. This pseudohypoaldosteronism type 2 or Gordon syndrome, it occurs due to autosomal dominant disorder leading to the mutation in WNK kinases. Okay, because of this here there is no action or resistance to aldosteronism. Because of this resistance to aldosteronism, this will cause there is no reabsorption of sodium and water, and as a result this will result in volume depletion. Okay, because of this volume depletion this will trigger renin, resulting in hyperrenism will occur, and this will also renin will in the pathway it will increase the angiotensin 2, and finally it will increase the aldosterone levels. So as a result there is hyperaldosteronism. This hyperaldosteronism will in turn lead to hypertension. Right, now let us now learn the criteria. AHA criteria of 2017 revised categories of BP in adults. So if you see this criteria, first we have normal is less than 120 millimeters of Hg of systolic blood pressure. Diastolic blood pressure, it is less than 80 millimeters of Hg. Elevated blood pressure is 120 to 129, less than 180 is diastolic blood pressure. And if you see hypertension, what is stage 1 hypertension? That is 130 to 139 and 80 to 89. Whereas stage 2 hypertension, it is more than 140 is stage 2 hypertension, and more than 90 is stage 2 hypertension. Now let us learn about the BP goals. BP goals of pharmacological therapy. What is the goal of BP that should be kept in patients with hypertension with some other diseases. Okay, so if you see a patient with clinical cardiovascular disease or 10 years cardiovascular disease risk more than 10%, his BP goal, if you see, it should be less than 130/80. Okay, if a patient has diabetes mellitus, his goal should be less than 130/80. If he had chronic kidney disease or post transplantation, or if the patient has heart failure or stable ischemic disease, stable ischemic heart disease, okay, or if the patient has secondary stroke prevention, okay, in all these cases the patient should have the BP goal of less than 130/80. Okay, now we have all the, I will write all the criteria again in elderly and adults in different diseases. Okay, we have JNC criteria of 7, target BP goal. Recently there is JNC 8 criteria and AHACC criteria or AHA criteria. For all these we are learning about target goal only. Hypertensive patients with the following. So if you see elderly, the JNC criteria takes that the target BP goal to be 140/90 in patients who are aged more than 60 years. According to JNC 8, it should be less than 150/90 according to age more than 60 years. And according to AHC criteria, it should be less than 130 for those who are aged between more than 65 years. Then in adults, the BP goal should be less than 140/90. Then if you see the target goal for adults less than 60 years, aged less than 60 years is less than 140/80, and according to JNC 8 it is less than 140/90, it is less than 140/90 with age less than 60 years, and according to ACC criteria it is less than 130/80 for those aged less than 65 years. Okay, those with coronary heart disease, patients with coronary heart disease, the goal of BP according to JNC 7 is 130, less than 130/80. According to JNC 8 it is less than 140/90. According to AHC it is less than 130/80. So this goal is for coronary heart disease, diabetes mellitus and chronic kidney disease. Okay, so this is about the JNC criteria 7, S8 and ACC criteria. Now let us learn about the management of hypertension. So if you see the management of hypertension, so in this first we should ask the patient to undergo lifestyle modifications, and like modifications you should ask him to exercise, and finally you should give drugs. If you see the cardiovascular risk, so according to ACC or AHA Hypertension 2017 guidelines, every patient who is newly diagnosed with hypertension, they are recommended to screen for and treatment of other modifiable risk factors. Screening and treatment of modifiable risk factors, cardiovascular risk factors is recommended. Okay, so if you see what are the cardiovascular factors, cardiovascular risk factors are of two types. One, we have modifiable risk factors, and second we have relatively fixed risk factors. Modifiable risk factors include current cigarette smoking, diabetes mellitus, dyslipidemia, or hypercholesterolemia, and these include overweight and obesity, physical inactivity or low fitness. These also include unhealthy diet. Whereas relatively fixed risk factors are chronic kidney disease, family history, increased age, low socioeconomic status, male sex, obstructive sleep apnea, and also psychosocial stress. Okay, now if you see the management of hypertension, first we should see lifestyle modifications. In lifestyle modification, okay, first you should ask the patient for weight reduction. So weight reduction, the BMI should be reduced to 25 to 18, and to maintain BMI less than 25 kg per meter square. And even the dietary salt restriction should also be less than 6 grams NaCl per day, and the patient should adapt the DASH diet. What is this DASH diet? DASH diet is the diet which is rich in fruits, vegetables. The patient should be asked to take the diet rich in fruits, vegetables, low fat dietary products with reduced saturated and total fat. Content should be reduced. They should be asked to take moderate alcoholic consumption. So how much should he or she consume? The consumption of alcohol, they should limit to 2 drinks. Limit to 2 drinks per day in males and 1 drink per day in women. Okay, and then if you see physical activity, the patient should have regular aerobic activity, like they should undergo brisk walking for 30 minutes duration. They should undergo brisk walking for 30 minutes per day. So these are the main important lifestyle modifications that should be recommended for a hypertensive patient. Okay, next if you see the management of hypertension, drugs or pharmacological therapy. Pharmacological therapy, we have a guideline. One, if age is less than 55 years, start ACA, that is ACE inhibitors or ARBs should be started. If age is less than 55 years. If age is more than 55 years, then you should start the patient on calcium channel blockers. In both these cases, if still by starting ACE inhibitors or ARBs or calcium channel blockers, if still hypertension is not controlled, then both these should be added. So even still, if hypertension is not controlled, then you should add D, that is diuretics are also added. Then even if the BP is not controlled, then we call it as resistant hypertension, and for this you should add ACE inhibitors, ARBs with calcium channel blockers with diuretics, with you should add spironolactone or alpha or beta blockers should be added in this case. Now this is about pharmacological therapy. Now if you see, the next important thing is hypertensive crisis. There is something called as hypertensive crisis. Hypertensive crisis. What is hypertensive crisis? Hypertensive crisis, we call it if BP is more than 180 by 120 millimeters of Hg. That is, if systolic blood pressure is more than 180, diastolic blood pressure is more than 120, then we call it as hypertensive crisis. It is of two types. One, there can be hypertensive urgency where there is no end organ damage. Hypertensive urgency, there is no end organ damage is present, then it is hypertensive urgency. We have hypertensive emergency where if there is end organ damage is present, then it is called as hypertensive emergency. Now if you see the management of hypertensive crisis, it has the following things. First, if systolic blood pressure is more than 180 and diastolic blood pressure more than 120 millimeters of Hg, then you should see whether the target organ damage is present or not. Okay, if target organ damage is present, then you should treat it as hypertensive emergency, where you should admit the patient in the ICU, and then you should assess for aortic dissection. If the patient has a hypertensive emergency, assess for aortic dissection. If it is a pregnant female, assess for eclampsia, or also you can assess for pheochromocytoma crisis also. If any of these are positive, then you should reduce the systolic blood pressure to less than 140 in first hour and to less than 120 if aortic dissection. If aortic dissection, then the systolic blood pressure should be reduced to less than 120. If it is negative, no, then you should reduce the BP by maximum 25% over 1 hour, and then you should reduce it to 160 by 100 to 110 over next 24 hours. Because these aortic dissection, eclampsia and pheochromocytoma are difficult conditions, you should reduce it to lesser systolic blood pressure when compared to normal hypertensive emergency. Now, if there is no target end organ damage, then you should intensify the oral therapy. Okay, next I would like to give the list of commonly used drugs for hypertensive crisis. Commonly used drugs for hypertensive crisis. If you see these, first commonly used drugs, if you see, we have common intravenous agents are present, and we have common oral agents can be used for hypertensive crisis. Okay, intravenous agents used for hypertensive emergencies. Okay, these include, if you are using diuretics, furosemide is the drug used for hypertensive furosemide is the drug used for hypertensive emergency in diuretics. Then vasodilators like sodium nitroprusside, nitroglycerin, phenoldiazepam, nicardipine, hydralazine, enalaprilat, and even adrenergic inhibitors like phentolamine, esmolol, metoprolol, labetalol, urapridol. Okay, so these are the list of hypertensive drugs used for hypertensive emergencies. Now, if you see the common oral agents are mainly used for hypertensive urgencies. These include, we have nifedipine, but this nifedipine is not used now. Okay, we have nicardipine, isradipine, captopril, clonidine, labetalol, hydralazine, nitroglycerin. Okay, so these are the drugs which are used for oral agents. Next, if you see hypertensive emergency depending on end organ damage. Drugs, hypertensive emergency depending on primary end organ damage. So I will make a list. Okay, first you have hypertensive emergency, and then recommended the drug and the drug which should be avoided. These you should definitely remember. Okay, if there is ischemic stroke, that is systolic blood pressure more than 180 to 200 millimeters of Hg, the recommended drug is nicardipine and the drug to be avoided is nitroprusside, because this increases the peripheral pooling of the blood and increases the ischemic stroke. Then if you see myocardial ischemia, if there is myocardial ischemia or infarction, then the drug used is nicardipine plus esmolol can be used, and the drug avoided is hydralazine. Okay, then if there is aortic dissection, then same esmolol plus nicardipine is used, and the drug avoided is hydralazine. Then if there is acute pulmonary edema, if the patient has acute pulmonary edema due to systolic dysfunction, in that cases you should give nicardipine plus nitroglycerin plus loop diuretics, and the drugs which are avoided are hydralazine is avoided and even beta blocker is avoided. Then if you see acute pulmonary edema due to diastolic dysfunction, if acute pulmonary edema due to diastolic dysfunction, then drug avoided is the drug given is esmolol plus nitroglycerin plus loop diuretics are given, and the drug which is avoided is hydralazine. Sorry, it is not there. Okay, then if there is acute kidney disease, acute kidney injury, then the drug that is given is phenoldiprem is given. So these are the different drugs which are given. Okay, next, one more important thing is diseases with hypertension and the target. Okay, this is one more list. So if the patient has hypertensive encephalopathy, okay, then we should reduce the mean arterial pressure by 25% over 8 hours using sodium nitroprusside. So this is the target. Okay, then we have if the patient has acute ischemic stroke, so we should keep the systolic blood pressure to be less than 185 and diastolic blood pressure to be less than 110 using labetalol and nicardipine. Okay, this is for acute ischemic stroke. If the patient has intracranial hemorrhage with raised intracranial pressure, then you should keep mean arterial pressure to be less than 130 and systolic blood pressure to be less than 180. If there are no features of raised intracranial tension and subarachnoid hemorrhage, then you should keep mean arterial pressure to less than 110 and systolic blood pressure to less than 160, and you should keep diastolic blood pressure to less than 690. Okay, what is mean arterial pressure? It is diastolic blood pressure plus 1/3 of pulse pressure. Okay, so this is about the hypertensive urgency and emergency. Thank you for watching.